Well, hello and welcome. I'm Mary Lee LaBay, founder of Integrative Healing Arts Academy. And in this video, I'm joined by one of my graduates of the Integrative Hypnotherapy and Past Life Regression Professional Training course, Graham Robinson. We plan to open up a real dialogue about the art and practice of hypnotherapy. Graham is bringing forward questions about techniques, strategies, and the finer points of executing sessions with confidence. And together we'll explore clear answers, practical insights, and even a few advanced tips from my decades of experience. Whether you're a practicing hypnotherapist, a student sharpening your skills, or simply curious about how hypnotherapy really works in practice, you'll find valuable takeaways here. Graham, I would like you to introduce yourself, please, and then we'll dive in and begin the conversation.
Hi, Mary Lee. Thank you for that. So as you said, my name's Graham Robinson, and I completed your course, both integrative hypnotherapy and, of course, past life regression hypnotherapy, which is one of the reasons that I sought you out because I read your book. So I wanted to do past life work. My background is one of having written two memoirs about early childhood trauma and having lived experience. And the second memoir, though, was focused on how adults, because of the trauma carrying through from childhood to adulthood, how adults can go about recognizing it and then healing from it. And so my goal was to have a therapy that I could work with primarily older men who may not recognize these symptoms. And so I'm trying to work with them and use a therapy that's quite gentle and not so invasive in many respects. And so that's why I was attracted, and I love hypnotherapy, so I was attracted to using that. So that's my goal, and I've started down that path now. And it's not restricted to males, but I'm hoping to help older men to understand that the problems they had in childhood were not things that they should accept in as they age, if it's causing them problems. So that's where I'm coming from. And yes, I certainly enjoyed the course.
Yes, well, congratulations
Mm.
on your books, by the way.
Thanks. That's nice from somebody who's written how many books now, Mary Lee?
I've written six, you've written
Yeah,
two, right? I mean,
there
it's a
you go.
great accomplishment. Yeah.
Yeah, I must admit, yes, when people talk about it, they often talk about, I want to publish my book, I've written it. And I say, well, publish. You can self-publish, publish. Don't leave it sitting in the drawer. It is quite an achievement once you see it out there. Even if, one of my books, I don't think sold more than 10 copies. Um,
So
but
far. So
so far that's true. But yes, no, it's great. Mm.
good. Well, first of all, congratulations on graduating from the program. And I'm just so delighted with the work that you do and the focus that you have. I think that's going to be very important. A lot of men, and especially older men, people of my generation, your generation, they don't always know that they can seek out counsel. I was raised in a generation where you didn't get therapy because then people would frown upon you that something's wrong with you mentally. And
Mm.
now everybody has a therapist, which is great. But, some of the older gentlemen may not recognize that that's really an option. And I know that the work that you do will really help them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The same with me. I, for many years, thought, being hit and being treated the way I was just the way it was. That's you grew up with that. Just get on with your life. But of course, yeah, we all know that that trauma sits in you and tends to leak out when you're starting to age. After the 40s, 50s, it starts to show.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, it does. So during the course, you had all sorts of wonderful questions. There are always the students that stand out because they're the ones that, I have a question. Wait, what about this? And so I thought this is a great opportunity to share the questions and the answers with a larger audience so that other students or other hypnotherapists can also benefit from this whole discussion. So
Right.
what you got for me?
Okay. Well, I should say that, of course, part of my background career was in radio as a broadcaster and an interviewer. So I'm always curious. So sometimes too much when I meet people, I end up interviewing them as opposed to just chatting to them. But you mentioned confidence in your introduction, and the one thing, and it may be a personal thing for me, and others may not feel this, but I am I'm often, even now, and I've done quite a few sessions with various people, um, that I'm still nervous going into the session because I'm I'm nervous about wanting to help them, and that nervousness is it just practice to get you through that, do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, practice is really going to help because part of the nervousness might be, that question of, can I help them, or I hope I can help them, is kind of multifaceted. One is, will I pull out the right technique to use at the right moment? Am I going to do everything correctly? And then also feeling a little bit of responsibility for their healing. Like somehow this is something you have to do for them. And so I think, if we can kind of step back and realize that people will heal at the pace that they can, right? Now, the first part of that, learning the techniques, that's going to be primary, right? So just getting comfortable with all the techniques and knowing that you'll, oh yeah, this one, and you'll remember which technique and how to do it, is really going to help. That'll alleviate most of the nervousness. But it's I don't want to say it's not our responsibility, but our responsibility is to provide those techniques. I have clients that, move at a snail's pace. And, I know that they could go faster. I know that they could, the light bulb should be going on. And that's my pace, not theirs, right? And so um, if we rush that or try to get to that goal too quickly, um, it may be less effective because, either they won't really get it, they won't be in the right place to get it, um, because they got there before their comfort or before other foundational, um, I don't know, facts were sorted out, before other things happen. So um, we have to release our agenda of how fast they're going to move. I have other people that are just like rabbits,
Mm.
compared to the turtle, right? That they just go, they grab onto it, they're ready the next day for more, and they can really progress fast. But that's not everybody, and does that answer your question? That
Yes, I suppose you raised a couple of things in there that I was going to ask as well about techniques, but one question. So, thinking of a new practitioner, like myself or somebody else, um, should you have, or do you think you should have a set of well understood therapies to be techniques to begin with, like say parts therapy and a couple of others that you use a lot to always have as your go-to, or is that going to limit your thinking when you're actually with the client? Do you think you should just really try anything that you feel is right?
well, because I teach you organic, client-centered approach. A lot of times we can be very creative within that and simply ask questions that are appropriate, right? Like I'm speaking and then you say, "Oh, that brought up a question," and then you can, bring that question in. And so it doesn't have to be a formalized technique with a protocol. It can simply be the most logical question. That said, when I'm teaching my course, as you know, there are a lot of techniques that I teach you, over a dozen different protocols and and structures that will help you in your sessions. And what I tell the students in the beginning, it is overwhelming. It's a lot to learn. And so if you can learn, and I teach them to you in the course in the order that I want you to learn them, because the first ones that I teach you would be the ones that are probably going to be your go-to techniques, right? So learn those. Obviously the induction and all the different parts that go into that, and then secondary gains, parts therapy, object imagery. I put in reverse metaphor there, which is
Mm-hmm.
the technique that I created. But if you did nothing other than reverse metaphor, you're going to have a successful session. So if you can learn maybe five, add in maybe inner child into that mix and really get to know those techniques, especially secondary gains and parts therapy. You'll resolve a lot right there, and then reverse metaphor probably might be next because, like I said, you could do a whole session that way. And then as you get really comfortable, and that's why I have you do so many practice sessions. If you practice those over and over again, then go back to the materials and pick up another technique and say, okay,
Mm.
I've had clients who have had pains or strong emotions, and let me review object imagery because now, let me apply that to a specific situation, bring that into your knowledge base and practice with that one, and then go get another technique. It might be easier. Um, a lot of courses take 1 to 2 years or 6 months or, some length of time, 9 months. And I do try to provide that at a shorter pace, but I don't expect you to have every single technique perfect, if you're going to go through it and graduate in a couple of months, for instance.
So when you when you are working with a client, and say as you mentioned four or five there, which and many, as you say, many of the techniques are not difficult to learn anyway, and they're self-evident like regression and some of the others. But when you have a client and you're starting to feel that, okay, what I'm doing doesn't quite feel like it resonates, how many therapy techniques can you do with one client at one given time? Would you suggest there's a limit? So would you go from three or four, or is that too many? And you sort of just bring them out and think of doing another session?
I say do as many as it takes.
Right. Okay.
Right? So I limited by the time. So my sessions are about an hour. I always leave an extra half hour and allow the session to go over 15, 20 minutes if we need it. But if, for instance, if I start to use a technique and it doesn't feel like it's resonating, it's not really moving me or moving us in the direction that I want to achieve, I'll just do something else, right? And so in a given, I would say if we exclude the induction and the emerging, the two
Mm,
sides
mm.
of the hypnotic envelope, and we're talking just about the techniques, I might use two or three all the way up to maybe seven in a given.
Okay.
I don't think there's, I don't think there's a limit
It's
because,
just about working.
yeah, and the client doesn't really know. It's not like
Mm.
you're saying, oh, that's secondary gains. Oh, this is another technique. Oh, what are we doing now? For them, they're just hearing you ask questions and they're just moving along and having their experience, but you know that you've switched from secondary gains to parts therapy to object imagery and back to secondary gains, and now you're on to regression, and they're just floating along, following the flow.
Now, as you mentioned reverse metaphor, which I want to ask you a couple of things about because I love it, but there's a couple of things that I've had with a client that I want to. But
Oh.
if I could ask one thing, still with the therapist, do you feel that you mentioned obviously you have to step back as a therapist. Do you think it's important that the therapist feel that they've achieved something in each session, or are there times when it feels like you may not have achieved a great deal that you realize, but it may come later, but you may not have in that session?
Um, I think it's important that the client feels that they
Yeah.
have something. And I've had clients where they think they didn't, but when I talk to them in a subsequent session, they say, "Oh, 3 days later, it was all flooding in, and I was, I didn't think anything had happened, but I was noticing I was reacting to situations differently." So it can happen that the person doesn't really know what they got out of the session. Um, of course, I want to feel like they got something, but that's not as important as them thinking about it. And so one of the things that I like to do at the end of the session while they're still in trance, so we've done all the therapy and we're kind of ready to close things up, I'll ask them, what is your takeaway? How is this going to manifest or alter how you are in the week to come? So what is this going to look like for you? And they'll list it. They'll say, well, I realized blah blah blah, and I'm feeling different about this, and I've come to a really clear decision, so I know that this coming week I'm going to have better boundaries, or I'm going to respond to my children differently, and they'll actually state it. And that way, then when you bring them out, and it's not really just to puff yourself up, it's really to allow them to realize and articulate what it is that they received. First of all, I want them to feel they got their money's worth, and I want them to really implant it in themselves. If I say it to them, well, now we covered this and we did that, and you must be feeling better, it's not the same as
Mm.
them saying, okay, this is what I got. And oftentimes, when I ask them at the end of the session, they'll tell me things they got that I didn't even realize was coming out of that. And if there are any miscommunications or confusions or something, then obviously that would be a time that they could discuss that. But yeah, I try to do that, and then I bring them out, and so that we've completed this session with them really sitting in the presence of that value of the benefits that they've received.
The mentioning that people come back afterwards, I have received a couple of emails from clients saying this happened or I made this decision, which always feels rather nice.
Yeah.
Reverse metaphor is fascinating for what it does, and I've pretty much used it just about every session. But I did have a session with a client where the it didn't seem to be working, that they seemed to still be locked into their real world because a reverse metaphor, as for those watching who may not have done that, is creating a story from their own subconscious, which always leads you to what's going on, which is the amazing thing about it, what's going on in that client, even if they don't know it, which is the fascinating thing. But this client is very focused on sort of, I'm trying to get them out of their head, but they didn't go into it. So if that occurs with reverse metaphor, do you continue to try and get them to do the story, or would you then look at another therapy, move to something else?
So if a person is having trouble, and they do, they'll often they'll start a story and then, it sounds a little bit too lifelike. And I've asked them, is this a memory or a story? And they'll say, oh, well, yeah, that was my swing from when I was a child. That was my backyard. And so it's like, okay, we got to start over. One way to do it, to get them out of the memory and into the imagination, would be to make it totally fantastic. So, um, you know, you could uh, tell them they're in outer space and there are aliens and there are, trees that talk, or whatever. You can make it
Mm.
so, the kind of sci-fi or fantastical, um, or you could have, you know, tell them that, there's, I don't know. I mean, I haven't done it, but you could say, well, there's cubes and balls and triangles and pyramids, and they can all talk, or something. You can help get them into more of a fantasy. I would probably start more with uh, kind of a realistic fantasy, like not Little Red Riding Hood, but similar, like you're walking in the woods and uh,
Mhm.
I want you to look down at the path, those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So
It it's, as I said, it's quite fascinating. I did have a client that came and asked about one thing completely, very practical thing. We did reverse metaphor, and it ended up she was standing on as a child at a sports carnival to run a race, and she didn't want to run because she would get laughed at. And so we explored that, and she said afterwards that came from nowhere. Where I didn't know that was a problem for me, and she was still holding on to that issue from childhood. Um, it's difficult to ask the most powerful technique, but I would like to ask. I mean, I know reverse, as I've just said, is so powerful, but do you think there is one technique that is always your sort of belief that is the more powerful of all the techniques? Is there such a thing?
I think that the most powerful one is the one that is appropriate in the situation. But
Okay.
I think that for, I don't know, reverse metaphor has got to be way up there
Mm,
on, towards the top of the list. Um, yeah, it just really kind of depends. Of course, past life regression is near and dear to my heart, but it isn't for all, for all clients, and it isn't,
mm.
go to. I would say if you only could do one thing ever in your practice for the rest of your life, um, it would have to be reverse metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah.
Although I will ask some questions about past lives because I also love it. But it's funny, every time I mention to somebody that I actually do past life regression, they don't turn away. They go, "Oh, okay," and they want to know more and they want to understand. And more often than not, they do believe in it. Before I turn to past life regression and ask you questions about that, though, the core when you're working as a therapist with a client, are some of the things that you must remember, things like pacing, like giving silence, quiet, which is very difficult to do. Certainly for me, I like to talk a lot. So, how do you build that? Is it just practice, or how do you build that into your therapy work, the stopping, asking questions, giving the client time to think?
Knowing how fast to move, how responsive you are, that sort of thing. So there's two parts to that. One is when you're talking to your client at the beginning of the session, or maybe you've had a discovery call, but certainly you're going to have some type of conversation about what is it you want to work on, what's been going on in your life. And if they talk really fast, and they're just da 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 da, and they're really talking, you know that you're going to need to go faster because they're going to get bored between your questions. They're going to get bored between your words, right? So they're expecting a pretty vigorous conversation or, you know, session dialogue. Um, if they're more kinesthetic and you say, what do you want to work on? And they pause and, it's like they swallow the words and they digest it a little bit. And then they come back and they're speaking very slowly and thoughtfully and sensually. Then you've got to slow it down or they're going to be irritated with you, they're going to
Mhm.
miss some of it. They're, it's just going too fast for them. So then you slow it. So that's just in the questioning part. But if you ask a question, then again, you'll know, that the person is either a fast speaker, which also tends to be people who are visual, and then a slow speaker, which is more kinesthetic. So you'll know that you need to go slower or faster for that particular person. But the other thing that I do, you'll learn to be very intuitive. You become
Mhm. Mhm.
very intuitive with your clients, which really translates into your whole life then, because you can do that socially or, in relationships. But when I ask a question, um, I'm watching them. And if I can't watch them for some reason, I do some phone some phone sessions, or sometimes I'm on Zoom and the lights are getting dimmer and dimmer and I can't see them, or the phone kind of drops away and I can hear them, but I don't want them to, have to get up and adjust the phone or the computer. I've had it where, a cat walks by and then all sorts of things can happen. So there's an energy feeling that you have if you're in person with them, or can see them clearly, like I can see you clearly enough. I can watch, and even if they're just calm and thinking, you'll notice eye movement, you'll notice maybe a little twitch here and there. Um, maybe a little jerk of the head, that you'll see that they're processing. And so I just watch my client, and you can just feel it, like they might be really still, but then suddenly they're you can tell they're kind of coming out of that thought, and then you can ask the next question. So
Mhm.
that part is really intuitive. But I also tell my clients at the beginning of every session, or I tell them in the discovery call, but I tell them, always share with me if there's something that needs to be adjusted during the session. If you're feeling too analytical, you don't feel you're deep enough, you're having trouble coming up with the answers, I'm talking too fast, too loud, too soft, too slow, whatever it is, tell me in that moment, because I can adjust around you. Right? If you don't like the technique or you don't like the direction we're going in, just tell me. We can go a different direction. I can use a different technique. Right? And so we have that, that permission has been given, that they can give me feedback in the moment. So if I was asking too quickly, they might just say, give me a moment. I'm still thinking about it. Or,
Mhm.
you know, and so then I can feel really relaxed about whether I'm doing it right or not.
It's interesting you say that you can change. I had a client because I love the waterfall that you teach about. At the end, I pretty much use it at the end of every session.
Good.
This client didn't want to step into the waterfall. They didn't want to feel the water on them. So I just had them sit with their feet in the water, and we did it that way and washed away their feet. So it is really a matter of feeling the client's needs and working with that very much, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I, as you say, that once you get more confident and once you start to do more, and that's why, as you mentioned, practice is so important. It was for me anyway. The more practice you do, and difficult practice at times too, if you can. Um,
Yes.
past lives regression. Um, they are fascinating both for the client and the therapist. And sometimes I have to, if I'm doing them, I have to remember it's the client that's, I've got to be thinking about what they are doing, not, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if I can find out about this.
Right.
So, but I guess the first question that's asked is, how do you know that they are actually in a past life, not just making it up and imagining it? Do you have a sense? Is it just a sense with you because you've been doing it for so many years, or how do you see that?
Um, Oftentimes it's just a sense because I have been doing them for 40 years, experiencing them, having them or facilitating them. So there is an intuitive sense about it, but some of the more tangible clues might be that they're intellectualizing it a little too much. So, um, y- um, I had a client that I've worked with that every time I ask her a question, she said, "Well, I guess it's this," or, "Well, I think it's that." And I could just tell she's up here
Mm,
analyzing and judging it and deciding if this is right or not. And that's really, you don't go to a movie and watch a movie you've never seen, and every scene you're in, you're trying to analyze whether that's the scene or not. And so with a past life, you just want to go in and feel it and be there and verbalize what your experience is. So that intellectualizing, I often for me, now other people may have other experiences, but for me, um, when I'm making up something, whether it's a fantasy like reverse metaphor would be making up a story, right?
mm.
Or if you're lying or you're trying to imagine, maybe I'm thinking, oh, what could I put in that recipe tonight, right? To me, I can feel the front part of my brain is activated. Now, it might be different for other people. Um, this is not scientific. In fact, when I've looked at brain, it's like, my theory doesn't work, but never mind. It's works for me. So I can tell that I'm up here. It's a little more nasal. The energy is like here. And, if I were to tell you a lie, it would be coming from here. Right. And so when I relax and it's a memory or it's something that's true, or a past life, I can feel my brain back in here energizing the information. It's almost like it's coming up through me but back here, right? And so for me, I can tell on myself, but for my clients, I'm looking for signs like that, where they get out of their intellectual, analytical mind and over into that imagination, because that is what we're going to use in past lives as well.
Yeah, I found, and I haven't done very many, but the couple I've done have been very much about the pausing that a client has, that the thinking time. As you said, they don't answer quickly. They're sitting and they're trying to see and work it out. And I did have a client say, "Well, will I see things? How will it be?" And so I explained, as you have taught, you might see, you might feel, you might hear. It might just be a sensation. Do
Mhm.
you always if you are doing therapy, you have somebody in a past life. Well, first, let me ask you, how quickly do you move them through? I struggle with that because I tend to push people through sometimes. So,
Mhm.
so I've stopped doing that now. But how quickly do you think you should go through the past life? Is there any speed? Just as like how we may say to the client, now, what's the next major event in this life? How much time do you give them to ruminate, to think, and to do you just again go by your tuition and watch them?
Pretty much intuition, and feeling, right? Um, so you don't have to cover an entire life. So, they may
Mm.
jump in and they're already 35 or they're 23 or they're 13, or, they could start anywhere in that life. And what, so for me, instead of just going on the sightseeing tour, which can be very interesting, at the beginning of the session, I'm asking them, what would you like to accomplish? So, what I'm doing during the session then is looking for the resolution to whatever the issue is, or, I want to see when I was with my husband before, or I want to find out why I have this health condition. Uh, I want to know what my purpose was, whatever that is. I'm looking for those clues. Um, but when they arrive at an age, let's say they say, oh, I'm a young boy and I'm out in the street and I'm selling things to people walking by, or, I've got some goods and I'm selling them things. Um, I might want to hesitate there for a bit because, everything that the subconscious mind is handing us probably has some significance. So it might not, ultimately tell me about his marriage, but what is it, what's being built in his character? What are his experiences? Did he have his money robbed from him, or
mm,
is he, indebted and so he has to give his money to somebody, or does he learn how to become a merchant and how to be a successful business person? What are those skills? What's being fomented and what foundation is being built? And then, moving ahead to the next notable experience, a lot of people I've seen, I've witnessed other people, and they'll say, well, move ahead to when you're 20. Well, 20 might not be the magic number, right? So when you say move ahead to the next notable experience, they might move way to the future, or it might happen when they're 15, right?
mm,
Oh, the revolution starts, and now we're all scrambling and we're starving. He may not even live to 20. Who knows, right? So we can't predetermine what those ages are going to be. So we just have them move forward. And then as they're describing it, I always ask, is there anything else you notice? And then they can kind of look around. If they have said something to me that I think might be of interest or could hold a key or, could help enlighten them in some way, I'll ask about that. Well, you mentioned that there was, a gunfight down the road. I've been watching some historical movies in case you can't tell. There was a gunfight down the road. What did you learn about it? What happened there? Find out what else is going on. And then if there's nothing and I say, is there anything else you're noticing? No, not really. Okay, move ahead to the next
mm,
moment. So, I do kind of, so how I think of it, this is my internal experience as a therapist. I feel like I'm water, and um, um, a Mandelbrot set, if like there's on every plane there's a triangle and on every edge of a triangle there's another one, and it just keeps building smaller and smaller and more intricate, right? But I feel like they're in a situation where they're just trying to remember. So they're expending their energy in observing, feeling, taking in this experience. My job is to help feel around the edges as to what else might be interesting or important, right? So I'm always feeling around the edges. And so,
mm.
you know, if they mention the weather, well, maybe that's significant. Why are they talking about the weather, right? Um, or whatever. So I'm always just kind of like, okay, does the water creep in anywhere else? Right. And then if it's just a dead end, then it's like, okay, well, let's go to the next scene. And then I'm creeping around the edges. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? I'm
But it's a good metaphor.
yeah, I'm
Mm,
exploring and I'm feeling,
mm,
and they're telling me this story, and I'm in it with them. So, I'm in the middle of the street selling goods to people walking by. And I put myself in that situation so that I can become curious. What does that feel like? How do you feel? Do you feel safe? Are you happy? Like what is that experience? And then but I'm also the hawk looking for what else does he need to pay attention to, you know? And then that's my job. That's why it's so hard to do a past life on yourself, because you have to be the guide and the experiencer. And the benefit of having us there as the guide, they can just be really passive and observant, and we're going to do the scouting and explore, and guide them where they need to explore.
And I suppose people often think about the fact that they'd like to be kings or queens or Roman generals or something else. But I had a client, the second or third past life I did, and nothing really seemed to be happening. They saw sheep, and the sheep didn't see them or didn't come near them. Then they went into a house, and there were people, and the client said, "Oh, I don't think they really see me, but I feel good and everything." And then I realized towards the end of that, the problem was that they were invisible in this life as well to their
Oh,
people.
oh
And
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
so sometimes you're right, you do have to look and explore and really dig deep. My question is, do you always, if you want to do therapy, you do it in the past life, you don't take them back to a healing space, you stay where you are and do your therapy? Yeah.
Yep. So what I would do, like in the example you just gave, by the time you see the second or third situation, you have the sheep, you have the family, the people, you have, you know, and then I would say, um, is this something that is familiar to you in this lifetime? Does this happen to you? And maybe they say, yeah, I feel disconnected. I don't think people see me, whatever those
Mm,
responses. And then I, w- so I would, so obviously some therapy needs to happen in this life, right? But because we're in a past life, what I would do is do the therapy on the past life person, right? So it's sort of like spirit guides,
mm,
now we're going to have an influence on this person. If it's important, if it's something that needs to be healed. Sometimes we think they do, but really he needed that experience for some reason. But, and we don't know where the root was, but that seems to be the root of what he's experiencing here, even though maybe he didn't bring that up to you, but that's, all of a sudden, that's the aha moment is, oh, wow, that's how I feel here. So what I would do is, um, how would I do this? I have to put myself in the situation. So I would say, if you had the opportunity, you here, to talk to him there, what would you tell him that would be supportive or encouraging or help him to bridge that gap? And so now he's giving the advice, not you. We don't give
mm,
advice, right?
mm.
So he's giving the advice. Well, maybe it's because you wall yourself off, or maybe they are reaching out to you, but you're not accepting it, you're not receiving that energy, or maybe you need to step forward and be more sociable, whatever that is. So he's telling him, right? And so then say, make it or set it up so that then the person in the past life now walks in the room and does what this person has told them to do, right? So now he walks in, shakes people's hands, gives his mom a hug, and actually, asks them how are they doing, and
Right.
engages with them. And then we come back and you know, they have a conversation again. Okay, how did that go? How did that feel? What was different? And then maybe do that through several events in that lifetime, where he had remembered, okay, then now I'm at work and nobody talks to me and nobody invites me for a drink after work and, whatever. Okay, now you're going to change that up and see how that happens. Then, and that's the past life. But then once you're working with him in this lifetime, then you can apply that same thing. Or in the conversation, you can say, you know, he can tell him, if you don't reach out and you don't correct this, this is happening in another lifetime. I am you in the future, and we're still doing this, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to fix this. So you fix it, and then I'll promise to fix it on this side, right? And then everything gets corrected across the timeline, right?
It is interesting, the reverse metaphor, and it wasn't quite a past life, but the one I talked about with the young person who didn't want to run, we eventually did some that person meeting their child at that age, and but they were the person in this age telling them how they had become a good person and they'd be successful and so on. And that person told me much later, they emailed me, said they hadn't cried so much and relieved it. So you're right. I mean, it's about talking and exploring, isn't it? And finding all of those key points and understanding. And it's taking time to explore it, I guess. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Allowing that exploration. And it's so fascinating. But sometimes I get hooked up. Oh, I wonder where they're going. I want to know more. So
Yeah.
um so I do have to end this. I have a huge question for you, and it's probably a slightly unfair question, but you teach that we have thousands of lives. We have lived over a long time, and that's that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Infant.
yeah.
Infant. It's not
So
thousands.
I struggle with the fact that we don't seem as a human race to have improved. Our humanity doesn't seem to be improving. And yet we should be learning because each life is a learning experience. I know we don't learn in all of them, but you would have thought we would have moved to a much higher level of understanding about people and the world and so on. Do you have any answer as to why we may not be evolving as quickly as we should?
So should is a really powerful word, right? So yes, it would be nice and it would be beneficial if we were all moving, but a few things happen. One is oftentimes, so there's a misconception about what happens between lives, as though we're on this conveyor belt, we're omniscient, we know everything, we know about all our lives. Um, we can fix everything and come back in. That does not happen. Okay. The where we learn is here in the physical world, right? And so when we're out there, what we're carrying with us is the character that we've baked into us, not just, oh, I'm going to be a better person and I'm not going to steal and cheat and lie anymore, right? It's like you become that person and that's part of your character. That's what you take with you. So, because people are not actually making those changes in their lifetime, then they go out there, they still have their prejudices, they have their angers, they have their fears, everything that's um, all those weaknesses and stuff are just have not been resolved. And so they come into the next life and maybe there's trauma too, right? I think there's nothing more important than healing the traumas that we have in a given lifetime, because we've already had an infinite number of lifetimes when we didn't get therapy for the traumas
Mm,
that we had. We were killed in battle, we were murdered, we were betrayed, we all these things have happened and they've been locked into who we are and they're still festering. So the more we can resolve those and iron that out, the better we're going to be. But I mean, uh, we, everybody with an opinion thinks they're right. Okay. And so if I think I'm right, I mean, here the volatility is the political parties. Maybe in Australia, it's happening probably, it is in Europe, we know that. So so I think I'm right, and the other people think they're right, right? I'm right, they're right. And we're going to go to our graves thinking I'm right and they're wrong, and they're right and they're wrong. And both of those are based on perceptions and what you've been exposed to, what you're willing to admit, I mean, the research there's so much that's based on, but that translates into so many other things. And so then we carry that frailty or that stance with us because that's what's baked in, right? And we carry that, and then it manifests in another lifetime. Um, so, like for instance, well, I don't know. Let me see if that's an example. So our perceptions, are are just built on all of the experiences that we have, right? They are part of our sense of life. And so, yeah, that's why we haven't evolved. In fact, um, a few people have, you know, evolved somewhat, and the majority of the people are actually spiraling downward. Now, and the other part of it is, you may come into a lifetime with the best of intentions, right? But then you get busy, first of all, you're learning to walk and talk, and then you're going to school, and then you're trying to keep up with the social, whatever's happening in school, and you get shuffled off to a job. There's too many, not enough hours in the day, too many hours working. You're too tired to actually work on yourself. You just have to get up and do it again tomorrow, and so then not that much evolution is happening. Um, unfortunately. And meanwhile, we're just getting battered with either trauma or propaganda or, all these things that are shaping us and forming us the way that we are. Um, and we have to be very, very careful with our consciousness, what we're willing to listen to, what we ascribe to. I mean, if we're on the channels, scrolling Facebook and Instagram all day long, you come away with a very, lots of insecurities and I'm not worthy and everybody's having a better life than me and, all these things. And you know, it cripples us.
Does settle into us.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. So we have to, but we have to do those lessons here. So if we evolve, then, it has to be integrated. And then that's what, um, will carry forward with us.
Hopefully, as you said earlier at the beginning, there are more therapists and more people in therapy, and so hopefully that will spread,
Yeah,
change and
right.
change some things.
Yes, change
Yeah.
some things. Exactly. Well, thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No, that's I mean, could go on talking about past lives forever, I think.
Let's do another one and talk about past lives forever.
Yes, I mean, it's such a fascinating, and because I've experienced it and I've actually been able to prove the past life because there was still the same buildings that I saw in the past life, which helps when you can actually put a physical photograph to it and it still exists. But yes, it's certainly one of those things that the one area I don't know much about is soul retrieval. I'm not clear on what that means exactly. I don't know if we have time for you to explain that, but it's entirely up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
let's do a different segment and we
Yeah,
can
okay.
do some of those things because that would open up a whole new can of worms. So,
Yes, I think it would. Yes, but I mean, as I say, the experience of the learning was fantastic, and being out able to for me now to go out and practice, and feel confident in practicing. I'm confident now when somebody comes to me, of finding a way to help them is tremendous. Thank you.
excellent, excellent. When I first started, I was not confident. I know you see me do demonstrations, and it looks like, I must have always just been, like that. But in the beginning, no, everybody has to go through that learning curve, and the only way to get past that is to practice. And so I'm so
Mm.
glad. And look how quickly that's happened for you,
It
right?
it does give you so much confidence. One thing I will say to students signing up for your course, make sure they listen carefully to the police officer work that you did.
Oh, yeah.
That is such an amazing, I mean, that on its own is enough to make you think. It made me cry. It's enough to make you think that you should be helping people. Just that one session opened my eyes to what could be done.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
that was quite amazing. That
Actually, I think it's on YouTube. I think you
yeah,
can
is it? Oh, okay. Yeah,
people with
yeah,
hypnotherapy YouTube channel and find it.
yeah, yeah. People should because it shows the power. I mean, often people think, oh, yeah, we'll do some hypnotherapy and I'll start to move along, but that was just so powerful. So
Hmm.
people should search that out. Mm,
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. And I also remember we talked about leading and guiding and all that, and I
mm,
couldn't remember it's the term is leading and pacing. So we talked about when you ask a person, how quickly should you ask the next question, how much time, we talked about that. But then there's also leading and pacing, which is when we're trying to get a person into trance, because we don't lead in the session, but
mm,
we can lead them to that trance state of mind, um, by, so when my client is getting settled, I'm taking a breath and I'm slowing my breathing and I'm talking softer and slower, so I'm demonstrating through my energy, my voice, my breathing, everything where I want them to go, right? So that's leading them into that. When I bring a person out, we've been in this trance, we've been in this, dreamy, soft space. And then as I'm bringing them out, my voice is getting faster and louder. And, I'm picking up a pace to
mm,
be more conversational in this world. So that they're following and their, wheels are turning and matching mine, where pacing is when I need to match theirs. And so that's what we do more in the session is I need to pace myself to their rhythm so that, you know, we're following what they need and the timing that they need. So sometimes we lead in the in the speed and tone and stuff, and sometimes we pace with them. So if they're talking slow, I'm talking slow. If they're talking soft, I soften. You know what I mean? So then we're following them.
mm. Yes, it's very it's a wonderful skill to have too,
Yeah.
to understand people. It's certainly yeah, it's fantastic. Mm,
Uh-huh. It's fun. This is the best job in the world.
yeah. Mm.
It's so much fun. Well, thank you so much for your time today. What time is it over in Australia? I've got
Well,
5 o'clock here.
no, it's only 10 a.m.
Oh, 10 a.m.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good. Good
So
time
it's a good
for you.
time. Mm, yeah.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you on some future calls.
Yes, indeed. I'll be at your open office hours. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks,
I
Mary Lee. Thank
see.
you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.